I'm a lot of things to a lot of people. I'm a mom, a wife, a daughter, a friend. I do a lot of things for other people as well. I'm a healing coach and a nonprofit founder. I started Grit Plus Gumption in November of 2020 with a mission to help women survivors of sexual exploitation and domestic violence heal holistically in safe community. We provide free therapeutic services, we try to build community among survivors, and we host quarterly healing retreats for women who have completed our story workshop. But when people ask me who I am, I have to go back to who I am at my core and how I show up in the world. First and foremost, I show up with my heart. I'm someone who loves wholly and to a fault. I trust before I should, and I'm a connector and a healer. I bring healing to those that are wounded. But first and foremost, I'm a storyteller, which is why, in order to talk about sexual violence and trauma, I'm going to tell you my story. Before I can show up as a healer, I show up with my wounds as a rape survivor and domestic violence and sexual exploitation survivor. I never wanted to show up as a victim in my life, which may be why I kept those things a secret for so many years. I never wanted to seem weak, so I showed everyone how strong I was by building a wall and hiding behind it for so many years. I never wanted anyone to have to take care of me, so I made a way for me to take care of myself without anyone's help, while also showing up and taking care of everyone else. And that didn't do much good for me. You see, I'm really good at convincing people that I'm fine and I don't need anyone's help. I'm so good at it that people come to me for help all the time and know that they don't need to reciprocate that care. I'm also someone who has a great, albeit dark, sense of humor because my trauma is hilarious, right? I have all these tools in my toolbox of how to survive, how to make it through. But if my life is all about surviving, when does living come into that? If you're surviving, then you're not living. Everything for me came to a head in 2017 when my body started fighting back and all the bells and whistles went off. It was finally time to start listening. I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. So I did what anyone in my situation would do. I went to every doctor in the world in order to tell me what was wrong with me. Nothing. They all said it was nothing. But I knew something was not right. It wasn't until I found a naturopath with a straight shooter attitude that told me I had fibromyalgia, which is likened to PTSD of the body. And I cried all the way home. I called my sister and read her all the symptoms of which she had as well. She did too. And we cried about our trauma together. As only then was I able to start to name that I had trauma. Hell, after a life lived like this for so long, you start to think this is just how life is. It wasn't until years of therapy later that I realized I haven't lived a normal life. The first time I was sexually assaulted, I was blackout drunk at a college party, and he was my boyfriend. He was mad that we had stayed up all night drinking and playing spin the bottle with everyone on the floor of our dorm. I don't remember a single thing that happened, just bits and flashes of the assault. Only after he told me and a room full of people what he did that night. No one said a word, and I immediately felt ashamed. How could I call that rape if no one else did? I was alone. No one to stand up for me. I wasn't surprised by this at all, of course. I hadn't had anyone stand up for me most of my life. I felt alone and abandoned, and it only got worse from there. The next time I was sexually assaulted, I was awake and aware and stone cold sober. I remember it all. Again, it was someone I knew. He wasn't a boyfriend, and I didn't intend him to be either, but he took advantage of a time where we were alone and no one would find out. How did he know I wouldn't say anything? How did these men know I would never say a word? There's a power differential in place in any assault situation. I think of the time when my boyfriend told me and a room full of people that he had raped me. I was sitting on the floor and he was leaning against a dresser. He was placed higher than everyone else in the room. I had to look up to see him. Everyone else in the room was slightly lower than him as well. Did he plan that? Or did he know that he could demonstrate his power over me and everyone else by this one simple act? I think of the stories in the Bible where people sat at Jesus' feet, but he never placed himself above them. That was for the Pharisees to do. But no, Jesus would stoop down and draw in the sand. He had all the power in the world, but he never yielded it over anyone. After the second rape, there were a series of incidents that happened that would be assault adjacent. Things would happen to me whether I wanted them to or not, and I would just play along or play dead, hoping it would pass. A few years ago, I learned why I did this and didn't fight back. There were and are many reasons, but one in particular made the most sense. This was a trauma response. There are 3 very well-known trauma responses: fight, flight, and freeze. But up until a few years ago, we didn't have a name for a trauma response like this one that I had endured. Fawn. I like to explain fawn as people-pleasing to the utmost. Here's an example. You're in a bank and a bunch of men come in and are going to rob the bank. They make everyone get on the floor and we all abide. Why? To keep the peace. Sometimes you hear of that heroic person who takes the bank robbers down and fights back. Some people run, others freeze out of sheer terror. I'd like to think I'm the one that karate chops the heck out of the bad guys, takes their guns, and Krav Magas my way out of there. Not because I've taken a class, but just because I'd like to think I'm that badass. I'm not. In case you're wondering, I'm the one on the floor that when the bad guy comes up to me, I tell him, "Hey, I like your shoes." That's fun. I'm not only keeping the peace, I'm trying to get people to like me so they don't hurt me. I've learned through the violence done to me that the best way to survive a situation is to win over my assailant. There are many effects that trauma has on the body. I've named a few in my own story, and some of those are lesser known. For instance, a physiological response of the body, being sick and not knowing why, is one of the lesser known effects of trauma on the body. Add in violence and the aspect of harm, and that is compounded. Add in sexual violence, and you've just hit the button on an atomic bomb. Sexual violence has many after effects, from depression to suicidal ideation to eating disorders, from issues with sleeping and flashbacks to nightmares and dissociation, anxiety and panic attacks. The list seems endless. What do all these things have in common? After sexual violence and harm done to our bodies, we simply try to regain a sense of control over ourselves in the process. It's very unlikely that we have had the space or the people to process our harm with and through. If we do not process the harm, the trauma stays inside the body. It becomes trapped, and if not dealt with, it can come out in other ways. A more obvious way would be drugs and alcohol, or even sex addiction, that helps us feel like we can either numb it or control it. It may look like to the outside world that we are out of control, but these are all unhealthy coping mechanisms we use to deal with our trauma. We just want to control something since we couldn't control what's done to us. But why don't we speak out? Why don't we say anything and tell anyone? Why do we stay trapped in our silence and shame? It's very likely that early on we were taught to shut up or to keep it to ourselves. Or even more likely, our primary caregivers growing up made it either clear, overtly, or understood that they were not a safe place for us to share our hearts with. In my family of origin, I had 3 parents. I had 2 grandparents and a mother. I never knew my father. In this home, I was raised as my grandparents' 4th daughter, the one they got right. My mother was their oldest daughter and someone that had gone her whole life without a proper mental health diagnosis. Because of that, they had grown weary of her and were looking for a fresh start. I believe they found that in me. I was raised as their daughter, and my mother more like my troubled older sister I'm responsible for than a real parent. This put me on a pedestal with an expectation of perfection, or just, better than her. It's an unrealistic expectation on a child, but I tried my best to fill those shoes and make them happy. I was very close with my grandmother, but I knew that there were certain things I wasn't allowed to discuss with her. Not because she was emotionally fragile, but because she was so strong and so tough. The worst thing in the world you could do was disappoint her. The shame was unbearable. It was never anything she said or did as to punish you. It was just the fact that maybe she would look at you a little differently, and that would scare the crap out of you. That's why we called her the Godfather. Everything went through her. My mom, on the other hand, would flip out if the line at McDonald's was too long, her coffee was cold, or you forgot to shut the kitchen cabinet. There was always a storm brewing. You just never knew when it was going to start raining. And it didn't just rain, it full on stormed. From 0 to 160 in 2 seconds flat. If it wasn't so terrifying, it'd be impressive. So bringing any of my troubles to her was not an option. Again, neither of these women overtly said, "Don't talk to me about your problems." It was just simply implied, and I received the message at a very young age. So what do you do when something bad happens to you and this is your family of origin? You shut down. You keep it inside. You keep and hold the shame to yourself because shame from someone else is way worse. What if they don't believe you? What if they say it was your fault? No, I'm just going to keep this to myself. I mean, you're the best at punishing yourself anyway, right? Now, trauma is trapped inside the body, and life is teaching you its best lessons in survival. That weight you carry with you into adult life, and you develop a unique set of skills. Not to mention that most of the glaring effect of sexual violence is the inability and unwillingness to connect with a truly intimate level with anyone else, let alone a partner. I was always really good at making sex a priority. It was an escape, and it became a trauma response in the way that it served my fawn. I could make people like me. I could make them happy. If I keep this person happy through sex, then I am safe. Never mind what it did to my body every single time I participated, or in reality, didn't participate. I would dissociate and go somewhere else, leaving my body in a sense to separate myself from the action being taken. Or worse, make it unintimate and call it just sex. Having to name and heal the harms of sexual violence on your body is probably the worst you'll ever feel. You know that saying, it's going to get worse before it gets better? This applies tenfold. I've been in trauma therapy for over 2.5 years, and I'm still working on this aspect of my life. It takes time. I think that is the hardest part of healing from sexual violence. This action that took someone just a mere matter of minutes or seconds. Something you didn't ask for. This takes years to heal from. And I don't even think the perpetrator realizes their split-second decision will haunt you for many years to come. Did you know that most sexual assaults go unreported? I'm writing a book for the sexual abuse survivor, and one of the stats says that 25% of college women report that they've survived a rape or attempted rape during their lifetime, and only 40% of all estimated sexual attacks, whether rape is completed or not, are ever reported to law enforcement officials. This is according to healthresearchfunding.org. For me, I never reported the assaults. I didn't believe they were what they said they were, and I didn't trust law enforcement. How many of us are walking around wounded because of something someone else did to us and wondering if they'll always get away with it? Think of the psychological effect this has on a victim or a survivor. Now think about all the ways you've lived with sexual violence done to your body and the way you show up in the world because of it. I'm going to read a list of effects on the body directly from the RAIN website. And I want you to just get a sheet of paper and make a tally mark if you've experienced one of these negative side effects. You're alone, you're listening to this, wherever you are, just make the marks on your paper and let's dive in and see what you're still living with as a result of sexual violence. All right, here we go. Depression, flashbacks, PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder, sexual harm, self-harm, sexually transmitted infections, substance abuse, dissociation or checking out, panic attacks, eating disorders, pregnancy or fear of getting pregnant, sleep disorders, suicidal ideation. Now I'm going to name a few from my own experience and make a mark as well. Anxiety and panic, insomnia, fibromyalgia or unexplained pain in the body, ADHD symptoms or short-term memory loss, inability to connect on an intimate level with partners, numbing habits such as too much TV, social media, or the like, unexplained sad days, especially around anniversary dates of the traumas, OCD and controlling behaviors, habitually taking on too much workload, saying yes to too many things, taking on new projects to distract yourself from grief or sadness, irrational anger, short fuse or quick temper, fear of abandonment and loneliness. I want you to add up how many of those things I listed you experienced or have experienced in your life because of the sexual violence done to your body. And I'd like us to just sit with that for a minute. Let's just take a few moments of silence to really listen to our bodies and hear what they have to say in response. I'd like to lead you through some deep breathing and grounding techniques because what I just discussed is a lot. And you may be to the point where you need a break. And if you've gotten this far through this video, I commend you. So let's do some grounding and breathing techniques. The first one we're going to do is a 6-4-6. So you're going to inhale for 6, you're going to hold for 4, and you're going to exhale for 6. So I'll do the first count with you, and then you can even pause this video and do some on your own. So you're going to inhale. Ready? Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hold 2, 3, 4. Exhale 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now you can pause the video and do a few more of those on your own. It's a longer inhale but a shorter exhale. The next one we're going to do is a 4-7-8. So you're going to inhale for 4, hold for 7, exhale for 8. And I'll do the first one with you. All right, inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Exhale 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So just check in with your body where you're at. You know, both of these breathing techniques are really good during stressful times, especially when you're trying to slow your heart rate. The 6-4-6 is definitely good for those stressful times. The 4-7-8 is actually excellent for right before bed when you're having a hard time quelling the anxious thoughts. I do that every single night, a 4-7-8. I probably do about 3 or 4 and then fall asleep. So check in with your bodies. Okay, let's just see how we feel. Having listened to all of this, and there is a real thing called secondhand trauma, that your body is triggered by other people sharing about their trauma. So if you need to pause, walk away, and come back, please feel free to do so. The reason we do all of this is because everything that, like I said, I just talked about is really hard to hear, and you may have experienced some triggering moments throughout this talk. And I just want you to know that is absolutely 100% normal. It'd be weird if you didn't. And even if you didn't, either way, it's okay. So I want to check in with our bodies and see where we're at. Our bodies are talking to us all the time. But we get so busy that we push through, power through, and then forget to listen. And then one day it's too late. The body will get your attention whether you like it or not. There's a great book about the body called The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. This book explores the effect on the body from severe trauma and talks about different therapies as well as that help to treat the trauma. This book is decades of research compiled into one. It's like the psychology Bible on trauma. I highly recommend it if you're interested in learning more about your body. One last thing before I leave you today. I'm a storyteller, so it'll be another story. I was at the Allender Center Certificate Program for doing the work I do today as a healing coach and story sage. It was the section on sexual abuse, and I brought the story of my second rape as a narrative to read for the class. In the first session, you read the story, and others respond to you, picking up on nuances and things you didn't know were there. It's very challenging and vulnerable. We go on break, And it'll be 2 days before I get to go again for my second session on this story. In between breaks, God gives me the words, "This body has bore harm." It shook me. It broke me down in a place where I hadn't been able to go before. This body that I still live in. This body that drives my kids to school, makes dinner, lets the dogs out, picks up groceries, tells stories, runs a nonprofit. This body has bore harm, and I still live in this body. I think we separate ourselves from our bodies to survive life, and we forget we still have to live in these bodies that were harmed for the rest of our lives. We can gain weight, we can lose weight, we can dye our hair, cut our hair, get Botox or a facelift, but this body, it's not going anywhere. We live in this body. We can't escape it. So we have to do something about it. We have to choose to walk the very long road of healing, the one that seems like it's all uphill some days, the one where we feel like we're wandering in a desert and there's not a drop of water in sight, the one where there are potholes and ditches that we feel like laying down in and just giving up. But we can't give up. We have to choose to keep going, not surviving, but choosing to live, actually live, to love ourselves and our bodies again, despite, or better yet, in spite of. What someone meant for evil, for harm, we can choose to let God use it for good. We get to decide. I love what Adam Young says, a podcaster I listen to, who's an Allender Center guy as well. He says, "Your wounds can be your weapons." Will we choose to live and walk wounded? Or will we choose to heal and let our wounds become the weapons with which we fight against evil? Thank you so much for the privilege of being able to speak with you today. This subject is near and dear to my heart, and I'm grateful that just by clicking on here, you've invited me into your lives and your space. And I hope you heard something today that will help you choose to keep fighting for yourself another day.